What's up, guys? Let's talk about the origins of The Witcher. Stop and think about how many things have been inspired by fantasy literature. The works of J.R.R. Tolkien, C.S. Lewis, Ursula K. Le Guin, T.H. White. Trying to imagine growing up without any of that stuff is pretty difficult. So during the 1950s, this was the literary landscape that Andrei Sapkowski had to grow up in. He grew up behind the Iron Curtain, so none of this really was on people's minds that I want to be a fantasy writer. I mean, none of this stuff even existed for them. The Iron Curtain is what kept the Western influences away from places like Poland. Until the 1960s, when J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit was translated into Polish. The minute Sapkowski read The Hobbit, he fell in love with Tolkien. In Poland, there was no terminology to identify fantasy. It was just Tolkien. Sapkowski didn't train in writing. He trained to be an economist. And he worked in the monopoly that was the foreign trade. But he was an avid reader. He read at least 80 books a year. He was pretty aware of what had been done, how it had been done, and what could be done. So in 1986, he entered a competition in the magazine called Fantastica. This was a science fiction writing competition, and he wrote a fantasy called Weizmann. He won third place only because, according to him, it was a fantasy and not a science fiction. Even though he didn't get first place or even second place, his story did so well that in 1989, when the Berlin Wall fell and the Iron Curtain was raised, he was contacted by Fantastica 3 years after he had submitted his story, which was actually a blessing in disguise because his job in the foreign trade, the Iron Curtain caused the monopoly in the foreign trade. So when it was lifted and the Berlin Wall fell, he was jobless. Enter Fantastica telling him that people were demanding more Weizmann. So Sapkowski jumped at the opportunity because he needed money. That's where the Witcher series began. In 1990, a year later, he wrote a collection of short stories called Weizmann. All of those years, he had read those 80 books every year, basically training under Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. The Witcher is so much more in Poland than it is anywhere else. When leaders of other countries visit Poland, they are gifted a copy of the books. Obama was one of the recipients of the Witcher series. The interesting thing about how Sapkowski did things was not that he wanted to replicate Tolkien or C.S. Lewis or anybody. He wanted to be the person to bring the vampire that didn't drink blood, the professional monster hunter, or the sorcerer with flaws. He knew out of all the books he had read and that he continued reading that there were some things that were missing. I really love this quote that he says because it's very true. Poor cobblers make good shoes. They don't kill monsters. Soldiers and knights, they're idiots generally. And priests want only the money. So who's killing monsters? Professionals. You don't call poor cobblers, you call for professionals. And if you think about it, that's basically what many fantasy stories have been written about. The unlikely hero. Small characters that you would never go to for these huge tasks. Obviously, it's a moral. They're trying to put a meaning to the story. Like, anybody that seems ordinary can do an extraordinary thing. But Sapkowski, being the realist that he is, especially growing up behind the Iron Curtain, he needed to survive. Who are you gonna go to kill these monsters? You're not gonna go to Bilbo. You're not gonna go to Frodo. Like, honestly, seriously. You're gonna give your money to the person that's going to do this right. The first copy that he wrote of the short stories called Weizmann, that one's actually out of print. That one does not exist anymore. The first one that he actually wrote was not The Last Wish. It was actually Sword of Destiny, which he published in 1992. And after that, he continued writing an installment nearly every year until 1999. But by this point, Andrei Sapkowski had already become Poland's Tolkien.